Okay, I think that is starting the channel. It says we're streaming, but there's always a lag before it actually starts sending the video to the device here. Chat room, please say hi. Still shows me as offline. Oh, hey, someone is in the room. Excellent. And you're here for the Web Design 2 content, right? Just to make sure. Excellent. Good. Okay, we've got one student in the chat room already. Excellent. Excellent. How's my audio? Does it sound okay? I can always try readjusting the mic. Oh, good. Everything's still working from last semester. Brand new place to stream from, though. That's new. And I'll mention ahead of time, I have 3 dogs down here with me, so if anything exciting happens, I'm sure they will make their presence known. Come on, it says I'm live. Ah, it's playing a video before it'll show me my video. Look at that. Rocket Pass 4 is the ad I'm watching right now. That looks cool. Something or another about buy a Honda, yeah. This one showing cars, but not Hondas. Some sort of racing game. Okay, there we go. That should be my video now. Okay, look at that. Okay. The chat room is working. The video is working. I think we're ready to start our very first stream of the semester. All right. The recording will probably have caught a little bit of this already, but maybe I'll remember to cut it out. I want to welcome you to the fall semester 2019. We are offering Web Design 2 for the first time ever in the fall semester. I'm really excited. And it's thanks to everyone who registered from last winter's Web 1 online course. I think that is pretty exciting that we were able to offer the course this semester, and I'm glad that you're here again. Everyone that's in the class is actually a student that I've had in the past. That's another first, I think, for me. So I'm excited about this semester. And I'm also excited because I think that our transition from Web 1 to Web 2 is actually going to be very smooth. A lot of times when I've taught Web 2, I haven't always been able to rely on the fact that everyone has had me for Web 1 or that everyone was even using the same book at the same time. But this semester, we're using the exact same book called Learning Web Design, written by Jennifer Robbins. If you haven't gotten the book yet, or if your e-digital version of the book had expired, you can get that at the Mid Bookstore, or you can purchase it online. This week is going to be refreshing our memories from some of the tools that we used in Web Design 1, and it's also going to start talking about responsive design, responsive website design. Everyone's familiar with Moodle from previous semesters, but I do want to just plug really quickly uploading a photo, an avatar, an updated avatar of yourself into both Moodle and our Slack chat room. The links to all of the things that you're going to need this semester are in the upper right-hand corner here of Moodle. We're using Slack again. So if you're watching this recording and you have questions, say hi in the Slack chat room. If you're live on Twitch, you can actually use the chat room that's at the bottom of the video, and that's a great way to ask me questions during the live stream. Web Design 1, we focused on using the text editor called Atom, which was built by GitHub, I believe. But this semester, one of our goals is to show you how other tools can be used for web design, and we're picking up a different text editor. This one's called Visual Studio Code. It's by Microsoft. Now, what's pretty funny now since I started teaching this class is I was picking 2 different text editors that had different opinions about how they should work. One from GitHub, that's Atom, and one from Microsoft, Visual Studio Code. And since I started teaching web design 2, Microsoft has purchased GitHub. So technically, both Atom and Visual Studio Code are made by the exact same company. Their teams are probably a little bit different, but what I've seen over the past couple years is that Atom and Visual Studio Code offer very similar functionality and even similar keyboard shortcuts, which is good. So your transition from what you used last semester to Visual Studio Code this semester should be really smooth. But tonight I want to focus on some tips and techniques that I use that are going to go very well with the scavenger hunt that each of you needs to participate in this week. And I took a quick look before the live stream, and I think everyone's already shared at least one tip. And I think I'll be highlighting a few of the ones that you showcased in Moodle as well. The last links here in the quick links area are a link to LinkedIn Learning. This used to be the link to lynda.com, but lynda.com is kind of merging with LinkedIn Learning. LinkedIn, who is also owned by Microsoft. Wow, it looks like 3 of the 5 links here are owned by Microsoft. LinkedIn Learning is owned by Microsoft, and they purchased lynda.com a couple years ago. They had kept the brands separate, but now they're merging them together. So what I've seen so far is that most videos, it is probably going to send you LinkedIn emails. I see a comment in the chat room. You're going to be asked if you want to add it to your LinkedIn. If you don't have a LinkedIn profile, you don't have to do that. But the cool feature of LinkedIn over what lynda.com had is if you complete a video course on LinkedIn Learning, you can actually add a certificate of completion that shows up on your LinkedIn profile. So that might be an interesting way to showcase your skills for potential employers. The transition has been pretty smooth overall. I was trying to say that most of the video links that I've used in my web design courses automatically redirect to the video located in LinkedIn Learning, with one major exception. The responsive design video that I used to introduce the concept of responsive design has been retired. So I haven't been able to find a single course in LinkedIn Learning that really covers the overall concepts the way that I wanted. So I'm going to try to talk about responsive design tonight and next week myself, and potentially have you do an activity next week where you're going to try to find your own resources about responsive design and share those with everyone. Kind of like how we did the Visual Studio scavenger hunt this week. So that's LinkedIn Learning. It's a really great resource. I'll be linking to some courses. What's interesting about Web Design 2 is there are topics that we're going to explore a lot more in depth than we did in Web 1. So I will sometimes share LinkedIn Learning courses that I want you to watch, and sometimes I will provide links to other web resources that I want you to consider. And it's completely up to you which ones you use. Sometimes I'll ask you to pick like 2 or 3 and compare them, and sometimes you'll just have to pick one resource to summarize. But I think that's going to be a nice supplement to our textbook. And the textbook, I think I had a couple questions about that before the semester began. The reason we're using the same one is that was a thick book, and every chapter is so well written, but I couldn't fit it all into a single 16-week course. So we had skipped around. You might remember that we kind of jumped around towards the end of the semester, and there is a whole chapter on JavaScript that we're going to talk about more in depth this semester. There's a chapter about responsive design that we're going to be looking at, and we'll be finishing out, I think, just about every chapter in that book. So if you made the investment in Web Design 1, I promise you it'll be worth it through Web Design 2. And then the last link here, as I'm introducing Moodle, is the instructor Twitch channel, which you're probably watching right now. If you are not able to catch a live stream, I am doing my best to take the recordings before they expire and put them on my YouTube channel, so that way there's another avenue for you to like, subscribe, and all that jazz. But you can even hit the bell icon, I think this is what YouTubers say, and you'll be notified when the next video is available from our class. Okay, so that is Moodle. I'm going to just jump over to the task list. I've done my best to give an overview of every single week up at the very top. This is the first thing that you should check out when I open up the next week, is get a feel for what themes we're going to be studying. Then I've tried to be extremely detailed in these task lists. So this week, you already voted on when you can attend the live stream. I'm asking you to make sure you still have the textbook, watch a couple videos, join our Slack. There's the plug to upload your photo to Moodle and Slack. Participate in the icebreaker, and I think everyone's done this already. That went really well. I thought that there was a chance that the Web Design 1 students might be using our Slack as well, but it looks like they may have gotten their own, or they're at least not joining in our icebreaker anymore. So it might just be us in Slack, in which case use it as much as you can. Communicate with me, communicate with each other. I've loved having Slack as a communication tool for the last couple semesters, but I think we're just scratching the surface of how we can use it. In Web Design 2, there are going to be specific assignments where I'm encouraging you to actually do research, try things out, and share content in Slack as part of the assignment. So that'll pick up in a couple weeks here. Then the main focus of this week is reading the 2 chapters that are going to remind us of some Web Design 1 concepts and get us ready for our first topic of responsive design. So when you read chapter 3, some big concepts you need to know, we lightly read that last semester. I want you to read it a lot more closely and pay attention to the responsive design section that's on page 40. I did find a collection of quizzes or questions to put on a quiz that will help you recap some of the skills that you learned in Web 1 from those chapters. And the very first journal is due this week. The journals are really nothing different than what you've done before. You're going to be summarizing what you've learned, what challenges you've encountered. The focus for week 1, as it always is in my classes, is I want to hear from you. What is your plan for incorporating 6 to 9 hours of work into your schedule? An online class has extreme flexibility, but it also leaves you extremely responsible for trying to fit everything in and holding yourself accountable. This course is going to have a lot of independent research, and you're going to need to be able to dedicate the time to doing that research, synthesizing it in your head, and finding a way to communicate your learning throughout the course. And you can't do that Friday night before everything's due. But I know everyone in the class. I think this is going to be great. So introduce yourself in the introduction journal and share with me what your schedule is going to be like. So then the big activity for this week is the Visual Studio Code Scavenger Hunt, which is our first topic for the live stream tonight. Let me pull up Visual Studio Code. So here it is. Its icon is this funky looking folded, I don't even know what Microsoft calls it. It's some sort of abstract shape that represents code is what I think they're trying to go for there. When you open it up for the first time, it's going to let you read some helpful information about how the program works. And I think a few of you found the Learn section already, which will let you not only see some of the commands that it offers, but get an overview of the user interface and even explore typing into it as well. So thank you for sharing that in the scavenger hunt. What I want to do tonight is show you how I use Visual Studio Code, that is, and showcase a few of the things that I do every single day in my job. And in past semesters, I shared that I was the director of programming at Mid-Michigan College. I'm no longer doing that as my full-time job. I've accepted a job at Schoolcraft College, and I still do a lot of programming, and I still find myself using Visual Studio Code, and I want to show you things that make my life easier. So let's get started with the interface. Along the left are some major sections. There's a big settings icon if you want to customize Visual Studio Code. The first couple buttons are going to be used the most. There's the File Explorer, which is going to open up a list of all the files that you have open right now. If you're working on a website and you have more than one file, you're going to see them listed here if you open up the whole folder for you to work on. As you open up files, you'll have tabs that appear across the top. The Find, or the magnifying glass here, lets you search the document and tabs that you have open. It's really powerful. And then some of the following features are more advanced for when you start working with a team and try to keep track of your code in source control. There's going to be a chapter later this semester where you get introduced to that concept. And then as you write JavaScript applications, there's a debugging interface. And the best part of Visual Studio Code, given how popular it is now, is the extensions area. If you open up this panel, you will be able to search for so many ways to extend Visual Studio Code. You can install different themes. You can install plugins that actually will let you write other coding languages inside of Visual Studio Code that will check your code automatically, that will automatically run things, that will allow you to copy and paste better. Really, if there's something that you don't think Visual Studio Code can do, oftentimes you can enhance it to do it by clicking on this extensions area and finding a plugin. I think at this point Visual Studio Code is more popular than Atom and has more plugins than Atom did. But that's enough about how to extend Visual Studio Code for now. Let's actually look at what comes with it by default. And I'm just going to click New File. So I have a new tab up here at the top. Visual Studio Code is a lot like Atom in that when you open up a file that's brand new, that's blank, it doesn't know if you're going to be writing HTML or CSS. So the first thing that you're expected to do is go in the bottom right-hand side here where it says plain text and choose the language that you are going to be writing in. So this file, the first file that I want to work with is going to be HTML. So you can just type in HTML and then hit enter to select that as your language. So now we're in HTML mode, and Visual Studio Code has now activated everything it knows about HTML, which is an awful lot, starting with autocomplete. So as I start typing in here, I can start typing HTML, and what Microsoft calls IntelliSense starts to appear with suggestions for what you might want to put in your document. The first recommendation is just an HTML tag. If you hit the arrow down though and you go down to the HTML5 shortcut, you get a preview on the right hand side of what it's going to insert, and it's actually going to put all the starting HTML tags that you need in the document. So I'm just going to hit enter, and it filled it in with some tags that we're going to learn more about next week. This meta tag that has to do with the viewport is going to be a whole focus of our next chapter. And you'll see that some things are highlighted. If I hit tab, I can jump ahead to them. So I might tab ahead to between the title tags here, and I might be able to call this my first web page. And I can still tab. I can shift tab to go back or tab to go forward. I'm going to tab one more time to get into the body. So, what type of tags do you remember from Web Design 1? Well, everybody's favorite div tag. You can type div and hit tab and it auto-completes it. Feel free to volunteer some in the chat room if you want to see how they auto-complete. And this is fast. I think everyone was surprised with how quickly they could write HTML tags with Atom. Visual Studio actually ships with a plugin that you had to install manually in Atom at one point in time, and it's called Emmet. E-M-M-E-T, I think is how they describe it. And if I start typing HTML, you'll see that E-M-M-E-T, yeah, Emmet, is right there. This Emmet system is actually a whole agreed upon way of writing HTML more quickly. So if you wanted to create an unordered list, you can actually just type UL. And if you wanted to create an unordered list that had a certain ID, you could actually just write the hashtag symbol, the $. And now it's showing you in the preview box that you're writing an unordered list and it has an ID. And as you start typing what the ID is, like if I wanted it to be Harry Potter, I now have an unordered list with an ID of Harry Potter in the preview. So if I hit enter, it would actually fill in that information. But notice that the cursor is still in between the ULs, so I can keep going. I can say with a greater than symbol that I actually want to put some content inside it, and I can say that I actually want to put an LI in here. An LI, as you remember, is a list item. So if this is going to be a list of Harry Potter books, I might want to actually have an LI with a class of book. That's going to put one LI underneath the UL, as you can see in the preview. But I can keep taking the superpower a little bit further, and I can actually put the multiplication symbol in there, the star, and say how many of those I want. I can't remember how many Harry Potter books there are. I think there's 7. So if I did star 7 here, the preview is a little bit off the screen because I've zoomed in here. But if I hit enter, you'll see that what it actually does is it replaces that short code with the full HTML. I've got the IDs and the classes already pre-filled in, and my cursor has been moved to the first list item. So if I remember what the first Harry Potter book is, and I think it's the Sorcerer's Stone, I can then hit tab to go to the next one, which I think is Chamber of Secrets, and I can just hit tab to continue filling those in, all without having to write any brackets or quotes or anything like that myself. I was able to add IDs and classes so quickly, and even that div that I showed you first, that's actually even easier to write than typing div, you can actually just assume that what you want to put in is a div. So if you want a div with a class, you can just do dot test and hit enter, and it defaults to showing or to inserting a div with a class of test. Same thing with IDs. So you could actually do, dot test # only one, and it actually puts in a div with a class of test and an ID of only. So this shortcut is extremely powerful. Now, why did I spend so much time showing Emmet? Well, I actually personally don't use Emmet very often because I forget it's built in. But what I do use most of all in Visual Studio Code, no matter what project I'm working on, is the ability to have multiple cursors. And I think someone started sharing this in their presentation already, but they even wrote off to the side that they weren't sure when they would use excuse me, my dogs are growling in the background. They weren't even sure when they would use multiple cursors. Well, I find that I use it every day. And one example here is if I wanted to change all of these classes of books, say I didn't want to make a list of books, I want to make a list of movies, I can actually just select the word book here. And notice how it started to select every other instance of the word book here. It's kind of like gray, selected with like a gray background. It's showing you that these are all the examples or all the other instances of the word book here. Well, if I wanted to select them and write over them, I can actually just hit Command D on a Mac, or on a PC it's Control D. And now you'll see that I've selected two things. How do I know that I selected it? Well, it's a brighter blue, but also you'll see the blinking cursor next to it. So I've selected two. If I hit Command D or Control D again, I've picked 3, 4. I can actually select all of them as I want. I can just hit it, keep hitting Command D. And if you're pretty sure that you want to select all the instances of book, whether they're here in this list or up above, there is another shortcut. I think it's Command-Shift-G. No, it's not Command-Shift-G. Control-Command-G. I'm sorry. And on a PC, it's like Alt F3. I've started using a PC at work, so I think I remember hitting Alt F2 or Alt F3. But once you have them all selected, this blinking cursor means that you can keep writing. So once you've selected more than one thing, you just start typing, and it replaces them all at once. So if I change these to movie all at once, I've saved myself a lot of finding and replacing or clicking or even typing over that word book. Now, the concept of multiple cursors is more than just find and replace. I know it looks like that's what it is, but if I selected all those instances of book or movie, you'll see that this blinking cursor keeps blinking after I've typed. I can actually use the left and right arrow keys to move it around. So if I wanted to, I could put both in here, book dash movie or something weird as the class. I can also move that cursor anywhere that I want it. So I can actually use, on a PC, be Control left and Control right. On a Mac, it's it's Option left and right to move like a word at a time. So I can jump ahead to different parts of this line. So if I wanted to switch to the word class with ID, which I know I can't have an ID with the same value, so that's probably a bad example. But let's say I had put ID in there and I wanted to change it to class, and I could easily change those back. The last trick that I want to show you is if you wanted to add something to the end of every line, you can actually just move all the cursors over to the end of the line with the End key on a PC, or on a Mac it would be the Command right arrow. And now you're writing at the very end of all of these lines at once, which is pretty cool. So that's multiple cursor support. I use it all the time just as shortcuts or as a way of even thinking. Like I will find myself just double clicking on things and seeing where else they appear in the document. Other things that are powerful about Visual Studio Code involve just hovering over anything that you want to learn more about. If you hover over an HTML tag like LI, you'll get a description of what the LI tag means built into Visual Studio Code. So that was Visual Studio. Let's working with an HTML file. Let's add a new file here, and let's work in CSS. Now it's a blank file, so I'd have to go down to the bottom right and change it to CSS. Or someone in the forum already shared that you can open up the command palette with Control-Shift-P or Command-Shift-P on the Mac. Here you can search all the commands available in Visual Studio Code, including my favorite, language. I'm always wanting to change the language mode, but I always have to lift my hands off the keyboard and go to the bottom right. I found out today you don't have to do that. You just search for language, hit enter, and now that brings up the same menu where I'm going to search for CSS. So now we're in CSS mode. Let's write something. Let's try to just set the background color of the body. And I'm going to write this like many of you have written it in Web 1. where you start typing what you want. And Visual Studio Code will give you this autocomplete. Let's say I want to set the background color of this. I can hit enter to autocomplete. And here's the first superpower that Visual Studio Code has in CSS. It will show you all the valid names of colors that you can use in CSS. And off to the other side of it, either to the right or in my case on the left, it will tell you the hex code for that color. Now, if you remember a color lecture, you can write any color value you want with the hexadecimal symbol, the pound sign, and then start typing the name of the color if you remember it. There's 6 digits. And what I love about Visual Studio Code is it looks at that hex number, knows it's a color, and then adds this little preview next to it. This little red swatch. CC is in the R spot, so that's red, and then the others are all 0. So that's only going to be red. And what I think a lot of students love is if you hover over that hex value, you can actually just use the color picker. So if you didn't like that shade of red, you can drag around and it will show you what the hex is of what you've selected. So if I pick this darker red, it's going to change it. And that little preview swatch gets updated as well. Super cool, super powerful. Now the thing that I love doing, and I used this when I was grading last semester, is everyone writes their CSS like this. Like they'll have one long line with a bunch of CSS properties. And you know from my previous live streams that I like to write them with each property or statement on one line. Well, if you right click anywhere in Visual Studio Code, there is a format document option, which is available as Option Shift F here on the Mac. I think it's like Control Shift F on the PC. Or if you open up that command palette with the Command Shift P or the Control Shift P, I think you can search for format document. Oh, it looks like I can't search for format. Oh, there it is. Format document. If I click on that or choose any of those options, it will actually re-indent the CSS the way that I prefer it, so that each one of these statements is on a separate line and the curly braces are indented a standard way. You can use that format document in CSS files, which is handy, but you can also use it in HTML. So let's say you make a really messy set of HTML tags here. I'm going to shift everything over to the left by using the command left bracket because that controls indentation. And I'm just going to right click in here and say format document. Oh, look at that. There's multiple formatters. So let's configure. I'm going to use the default HTML language features here, and it's going to indent it just the way that I like it. You might not get that prompt with multiple. I think I installed another HTML formatter that I prefer called Prettier, but the default one is just fine in Visual Studio Code. Goodness, I think those are all my hot Visual Studio Code tricks. In the chat room, were there any that you wanted me to show off that you either saw referenced in your scavenger hunt and you didn't fully understand, or that you think it can do and are just curious? Okay, someone's saying that they're still learning the program. Definitely play around. Open up your Web 1 projects, your Zen Garden, your website that you submitted at the end. You can open up a whole folder. If you just go up to File, Open, you can open up a folder, and then you'll be able to actually see when you click on this button all the files that you have in that folder. So here I have just Untitled 1 and Untitled 2 because I haven't saved them yet. When you have a couple files open, I think there's a Control T or Command T shortcut as well to see each of those listed. You have each of your tabs, and you can arrow down to jump between them, which is pretty handy. You probably already saw that in the top right. There's this little mini map of the code that you can see a preview of your document with the color coding, and you can actually just click and drag to jump to a section of the document. So many small little powerful tweaks in here that are just amazing. I think someone mentioned how you can customize the colors. You could spend days just picking out the exact color scheme that you want for your syntax highlighting, or you can go search the extensions for a theme from someone who's already spent the time to customize the colors. I think somewhere in here there's even already some defaults. Yeah, if you hit Command K, Command T, you can actually see some of the themes that are built in. And if you hover on any one of these, it'll give you a preview. So Tomorrow Night Blue is very blue. I wonder what Abyss looks like. Oh, Abyss is also blue. And then they have a high contrast mode, which looks just like a terminal, which is crazy. I'm going to go back to the default just so it looks like what you're used to. All right, so that is Visual Studio Code. I'm going to switch tabs over to the Mid-Michigan College website. I am going to use this a lot this semester still. I'm not in charge of helping build it anymore, but I'm still going to talk about it. I'll do my best to put a few new websites into the mix. I was thinking about using the Schoolcraft College website, and I'll even show it after this, but it doesn't demonstrate all the features that I wanted to show off tonight. But I want to start by just answering what responsive design means to me. A lot of us that have computers that program a lot, we're used to seeing the web like this, full screen on our beautiful computers with big screens. But we're actually in the minority now. Most web traffic happens on phones, believe it or not. And this is especially true if you pay attention around Black Friday. They always release the Black Friday and Cyber Monday like statistics about how many people shopped online. And if they release information about a subset of that to show what percent came from mobile devices and what percent came from desktop. And year after year, mobile is eating the world. It's well over 50% now. I don't know what the most recent number is. But people aren't looking at web pages like this. So at Mid, we were starting to get used to most people coming to our website were looking at this. And so to me, responsive design is about building a web page that is going to fit the screen size that anyone is using, whether that's phone or tablet or desktop, or frankly, a device that we haven't even thought of yet. So responsive design, in my head, involves taking the single web page and having the content flow or resize to fit the browser. And I think a lot of you just intrinsically know that this is what we should be doing because you asked me about it in various projects already. I remember the Zen Garden design. People were frustrated that they couldn't get it to look exactly like it was on their screen when they opened it up on another computer or on another phone because the screen size was different. So if you learned how to absolutely position things, you found right away that it didn't look right when that screen size wasn't exactly what you had open when you were designing it. Many of you tried playing around with percentages to try to position and to size things, but even that doesn't work well when things get shrunk down. But we learned a lot about CSS in different selectors that we could write last year. What you're going to be doing this semester is learning a few new types of selectors that will allow you to write rules that will select based on the screen size or the viewport size of the device. So you'll be able to write CSS that takes effect at the mobile size, at the tablet size, and at the desktop size. And when you're thinking about responsive design, you're often going to be starting with mobile first because that is the smallest, that is also the most popular now. If you start writing your CSS to be the mobile size, then what you can do is ladder on top of that additional CSS queries that will say when the viewport is actually this size, show more content. That's one of the basic things that we'll be learning is how you can show and hide content on different screen sizes. So you'll notice that when the mid website is shrunk down, this top toolbar looks significantly different. If I want to, I can open up menus of links, but there's just no room for them by default. We don't want lots of information at the top that takes away from the main content of the page. Now, as I resize this and more space becomes available, you'll see that the logo, which is centered on mobile, gets pushed off to the side when there's room for links in the search bar to appear from it. And the search bar itself is a good example because that's hidden on mobile. You have to actually tap to get the mobile search form to appear. On desktop and tablet, there is room for that. And the last thing that I'll point out is that this nav bar, a whole lot of links appear suddenly when you get to the desktop sizes. So that's what responsive design is to me, is trying to fit content into the viewport, as much of it as possible, but in a natural way that keeps in mind what people want to use on your website. And as you read the chapters this week, you're going to see an image you're going to see an image from Brad Frost talking about what web design means today. And you'll see this image of all these laptops and phones and tablets that web designers have to keep in mind. You need to test to make sure your website works on all these devices, which is really hard, if not impossible. But when the mobile web first existed, that's actually what people tried to do. They tried to build one experience for mobile devices, and they did that with a separate website. It was like the m dot, then the name of the website. So Facebook, I think, still has this m.facebook.com. We didn't want to build an m.midmich.edu because we didn't want to duplicate our content and build two sets of pages. So we decided to pick up responsive design and try to write rules that would allow the content to flow no matter what size device you were using. Because frankly, even if this were the total number of devices that you had to test with today, the next image that they show is that the web is constantly changing. Even this screenshot, this is what I love. The screenshot is totally out of date because these devices, like the PlayStation, what was it called? The mobile PlayStation, PSP. That's not even like made anymore, right? We've got the Switch, and we've got I think this is supposed to be a watch, but now the watch on my wrist can show web content if someone sends me a link, and I can open up a small preview of a web page right on my wrist. That wasn't envisioned at first, and if I want to make sure that the content that I build today is going to work on devices that haven't even been made yet and on screens that haven't been made yet. So that's what the goal of responsive design is try to position your site well to work on a variety of devices. And as you start looking into responsive design, you'll have to do some research of your own. A student shared with me one semester that with responsive design, you're believing that content is like water. And so this little image that shows how water expands to fill the container it's in is really what your web content is going to be like. It's going to fill up mobile, and on mobile you saw that the mid website became very tall because people are used to scrolling up and down on phones. What we've felt at the college is people are not used to scrolling left and right as much. So we use that scrolling left and right in very reserved ways. Not that you're scrolling the whole page, but maybe you're scrolling through a smaller list of things left and right. But the main content that people are used to scrolling through is vertical. But when you have a bigger desktop screen, like I've been saying a couple times now, that content reflows. Typically you have more columns of information that appear. And that text probably you don't have as tall of a web page, you have a wider web page that can show more content. So I love this graphic, and I love that a student shared it with me. And I hope as you do research, if you find an explanation of responsive design that means something to you or that helps you understand it, please share it with me. I wish I had saved the link, but years ago someone sent me a web comic of what responsive design was, and it was an animated GIF of someone just sitting on their computer doing what I just did for you for the last couple of minutes of just resizing left and right. And if you can find that animated GIF, please send it to me because that made me giggle. Okay, I think that is the last topic I wanted to talk about. We have lots more responsive design, a lot of the technical aspects of it starting next week. You're going to learn about what a viewport is and how to control that viewport with a special tag, the meta tag. And I'm pretty sure I already had it up here on the screen. We're going to come back and talk about every aspect of this viewport, controlling the device width and the initial scale and what that means in our next live stream and in your next exercises. Are there any lingering questions in the chat room? Oh, it looks like someone was saying that they knew what a PSP or a PS Vita was. Sorry, I couldn't think of that earlier. Cool. All right, there's no questions. Thank you for joining. And if you're watching the live stream, thank you for attending. If you're watching the recording, thank you for clicking on it. Please send me any messages if you have questions that you want me to cover in the live streams, and I will see you next week.